the housing market, we're going to talk about the housing market as we like to do. So in the budget last week, which we talked about, the stamp duty holiday was extended. The government decided to back these low deposit mortgages, and it's given the housing market another shot in the arm. I'm not sure it needed a shot in the arm again, but we've now had revised predictions from the estate agency chain Savills, and they originally thought that 2021 was going to be a fairly flat year for the housing market in the UK. They now think that we're going to get average growth across the country this year of 4% again this year. So another boost to the housing market. But it was their 5-year forecast I was quite interested in. So on average, 21.1% growth over the next 5 years in the UK, taking the average house price up to £279,644. And a better performance than that even in the northwest of England, 28.8%, and Yorkshire and Humberside at 28.2%. So uh, it just feels like at the moment the UK housing market is never going to stop going up in price.
No, I mean, how high can it go? At what point do we look at something and go, there is no way that can possibly be worth that? And as somebody that isn't on the housing market, but at some point in my life would love to get there, and I think I will, I'm sure I'll manage it eventually. But I look at it and I'm filled with this additional fear now, because I think, well, what if I were to buy a house in the next, say, let's say 3 years?
Mm.
What if we are in a housing market bubble? And because I think it can't possibly be worth now what the prices are claimed that they're being worth. And then I don't want to buy something and then immediately be in negative equity. So I mean, that's purely speculative. That could be completely wrong. Maybe the housing market will keep going up and up and up. We shouldn't, who knows? I think it's going up at a ludicrous rate. Personally, I don't think housing prices should go up any higher than inflation. I
Mm.
find it unnecessary that British people use housing as a form of investment. And I know Europeans and whatnot, my boyfriend's European, and they think it's kind of bizarre the way that we go about
Mm.
kind of owning houses and the way we treat houses and what we do in terms of trying to make more and more money, because it very obviously then shuts out sections of society. It's not on. And I can't think, it's not like the price of bricks or wood is going up at this
No.
pace. And yet, when you put it all together, it's going up way beyond and way faster than inflation. The only good thing to take from this Savills research, and it's like the most minor good thing ever. It's like the most minor win you could ever have, and it's for people in London who are already hit with ludicrous prices, and they're going to go up a comparatively lackluster 12.6% in 5 years, taking the average property price in London to a feeble £547,000.
Is that all?
So Londoners are finally getting one in the win, and only 12.5% for us. It's not bad, but I think it's a bloated and it's a false economy.
Mm.
And I'm curious to hear what you think, because you've been on the planet only slightly longer than I have, and you've been on the housing market for many years longer than I have as a percentage. What have you seen in your life as a homeowner, and do you think there's a ceiling to this?
Mm. I mean, it comes back to basic economic principles of supply and demand, doesn't it? Yeah, we are an island nation. There is limited space in this country to build on, and all of the time we're seeing rise in demand because of population growth. There's going to be some quite interesting things over the next, say, 10, 20 years, I would have thought, around the aging population and the oldest old in society, dying effectively, and this sort of property stock being held by people that have probably lived in homes, big homes for, say, 60, 70 years or longer, suddenly coming onto the market, and that might do something interesting at that top end. But at the first time buyer end, 1 and 2 bedroom properties, this is really down to house builders not building enough properties, and they seem to have no trouble getting planning permission to build homes, but when it comes to actually building out their permissions, seems to take a very long time. And I think I said last week I was very surprised to not see in the budget anything to encourage house building or to relax planning rules and just make it easier, because I think the only way really of tackling these ever rising house prices is to build more homes and to really up the supply side, because you can't do much about a demand side. That's going to keep rising as the population continues growing, but you can tackle the supply side and put more properties available on the market, and that will at least slow down the rate of growth, if not slightly depress it.
Yeah, I mean, we can only hope at the end of the day, can't we? I wish I'd thought actually to look up the figures on the number of houses that have been built in the last 10 years, but I don't think it's a huge amount at all. And of course, the policies, as you mentioned in the beginning, that we've had throughout the pandemic, because for some reason, our government thought that this was a market that needed stimulating. Um, House prices have absolutely rocketed this year. So this is according to research from Halifax. So between June and December last year, so this is not even a full year, the average price of a house rose £15,500. And that's because of the stamp duty holiday. And I completely agree. I think we need to build more houses. I'm 100% with you. I get the supply and demand argument. We need to stop doing policies like this. God, it just drives me absolutely mad. This is the bee in my bonnet. Like, this is the hill that I'm going to die on. It frustrates me so much. And and I mean, yeah, maybe better policies as well to persuade people that are older and are sitting on property wealth, whatever, large properties that they don't need, all their families moved out, there's only one or two of them, whatever, to downsize so that we can get this market moving a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one potential saving grace, and this sort of ties in with our third story as well, is as people move away from working in offices and work more from home, that could free up quite a lot of sort of city centre office stock. And it's actually quite easy as a developer or a building owner to get what's called permitted development rights on existing offices to convert them into flats, into houses. So what we might see is a huge flood of not new homes being built, but of existing properties being converted into residential from commercial use. That could help a little bit, and that could potentially help in London. That might well be why Savills are saying over the next 5 years growth in London will only be 12.6%, whereas up in the northwest of England it'll be nearly 30%. So that could explain some of that difference.
Yeah, and actually there was an interview in the Times this weekend with Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, and they were asking him, what does the future of the high street look like, blah blah blah, and he was saying the future is residential because
Yeah,
clearly things have moved online. And that's not to say the high street's completely going to die and have had no use whatsoever, but he was saying there will be more people living on the high street, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if that was actually kind of part of Tory strategy in the next however many years they're going to be in government, probably forever. Because I remember reading somewhere that if obviously they won a lot of rebel seats in the past election, and I remember reading somewhere that if those high streets look worse at the end of this premiership that they
yeah,
did at the beginning, they will lose those votes. But if they look
yeah.
better, they might retain them.
Right.
And so I think there is definitely reasoning and kind of oomph behind a policy that would transform a high street in a way that kept it looking nice and lively and with lots of bodies walking around on the street. So
Yeah.
actually I think that's a really good point, and that could be a really good thing, particularly for people in big cities all over the
Yeah,
country.
yeah. Well, we see it here in Cranley in our high street. There's a number of empty shop units, and I know the owners of some of them, and I can think of probably 5 out of the 40 or 50 shop units which are currently earmarked for that conversion process to residential. So I think that mix of shops and a few offices and then a few homes, it's about making the whole thing look presentable and much more of a sort of continental cafe type culture. People sitting on the pavements enjoying their coffees when it's not a day like today and tipping down with rain. That could help, and it will all have an impact on it. But I don't think that the UK property market story has gone away yet. I think there's still a lot more to come, and probably a lot more growth. Not guaranteed, by the way, because these are always predictions, and we don't know how accurate they're going to prove to be.